Well, welcome to this morning's webinar on Liechtenstein, part of our series of webinars talking about financial centres across the world. I'm delighted to be here today to chair the session with some very distinguished speakers who I'll introduce in a minute, but Thomas Zwiefelhofer, President of the Associated Liechtenstein Charitable Foundations and Trust, Simon Triebelhorn, Managing Director of Liechtenstein Bankers Association, and David Gamper, Managing Director of Liechtenstein Investment Fund Association. We're really delighted to have such distinguished presenters with us today. You'll probably know me. I'm Mike Wardle. I'm the Chief Executive and Head of Indices at the ZN. My job today is to chair the session and first of all to thank our sponsors. We are very fortunate at the FS Club to have really supportive sponsors who enable us to run this webinar series and range far and wide across the fields of economics, finance, technology, science, and other interesting things that we come across. The format for today is quite simple. I do this brief introduction and move out of the way so that we can hear from our speakers. And we have around about 20 minutes of presentation with time for Q&A afterwards. If you haven't used GoToWebinar before, the way to ask a question is to go to the dashboard on your screen, find the question tab where you can type in your questions, and I'll moderate those when we get to the Q&A session. The session is being recorded today, so if you want to watch again or you want to share the webinar with friends and colleagues, the recording will be posted on our events page on the website within about 48 hours, so that'll be available going forward. But it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speakers. I've mentioned the names already. Simon, Thomas, and David really cover the range, I guess, of the work that goes on in Liechtenstein finance. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from each of you your perspectives on where things are and where things are going in terms of Liechtenstein and its development. So first of all, I'd like to pass over to Simon, and over to you, Simon, for your presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for this very kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Let me kick off with a brief overview of Liechtenstein and the Liechtenstein economy. Next slide, please. Yes, here you can see where we are located between Switzerland and Austria. Next slide, yes. So most of you will know Liechtenstein as a financial center. And that's true, we are a financial center. In fact, we are very broadly diversified and a broadly diversified business center. The most important sector is the industry and manufacturing, which contributes around 42% to GDP. You see on the right-hand side some of the most known industrial companies, niche players, and market leaders in their niches, like Hilti, Hilkona, Roval. Since we are so small, since we are a small country, in terms of numbers, around 40,000 inhabitants, and with 160 square kilometers, all of these companies being in the financial service industry or in the manufacturing industry, they are to a great extent export-oriented. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates perfectly the uniqueness of Liechtenstein having access to two very important economic areas. On the one hand, to Switzerland, due to the customs and monetary union. So we have Swiss francs, a local tender. Our national bank is a Swiss national bank, and the financial services infrastructure is based in Switzerland. On the other hand, due to the EEA agreement, we have access, and all our intermediaries have access to the European single market. So there is a clear difference on the one hand to Switzerland, on the other hand to other smaller financial centers or countries, microstates like Monaco or Andorra, for example. In return, we have to apply all European regulation. So benefiting from the European passport means for us implementing and applying European regulation. Next slide, please. For a small country like Liechtenstein, it is very important to be innovative and to stay competitive. One of the recent, let's say, invention was the so-called Blockchain Act. In fact, Liechtenstein was the first country worldwide which introduced a fully fledged Blockchain Act regulating all kinds of digital assets. So innovation, digitalization is crucially important for us. Next slide, please. Just recently, Liechtenstein has undergone several assessments and ratings. Liechtenstein is one of the very few countries with a AAA country rating. It has been lastly and repeatedly confirmed in May 2023. So we have a AAA country rating with a stable outlook. On the other hand, the other ratings confirm that we have a very high standard when it comes to due diligence and a very high level of efficiency combating money laundering, terrorist financing. This has been confirmed by Moneywall in 2022. The report has been published just recently, as I said. And then we received very good marks as an early adopter of automatic exchange of information. Just this year, we had the on-site visit and the recent ratings from the OECD when it comes to information on request, tax information on request. We have overall a largely compliant rating and the best rating when it comes to automatic exchange of information. And when it comes to the efficiency, we will see the report will be published next year with regards to the on-site visit I just mentioned. Next slide, please. Well, this is now a comparison our Financial Markets Authority did with regards to the fifth evaluation round when it comes to the FATF standards. The red bar, this is Liechtenstein, the quite far left, and the blue bars we have quite close to Liechtenstein on the left-hand side. We have Germany, and the other blue bars, that's Switzerland and Austria. At the top, at the far left, we have UK and France. So this shows Liechtenstein is very, very efficient when it comes to fighting money laundering, and this is again confirmed by Moneywall. And compared to other countries, I think that shows the high standard of compliance. Next slide, please. The financial services industry is as diversified as the economy as such. So here you see a few numbers. What stands out, and Thomas will say a few words about that, is certainly the high amount of non-profit foundations. So philanthropy plays a very important role. And then if you take, for example, the amount or the number of service providers of trusted technologies, we have 22 compared to banks, for example, with 11. That shows we have a growing ecosystem thanks to the innovation framework we have in place and the blockchain law I already mentioned. Next slide, please. Now with a focus on the banks. Our banks belong to the best financed and solidly financed banks worldwide with a core tier 1 ratio of more than 20%. All the banks pursue a very risk-averse business strategy. We have no investment bank activities, and no bank, neither before financial crisis or afterwards, had to ask for state aid. And as you can see, our banks have a very strong focus on sustainable finance. The three major banks have committed to become net zero, representing 90% of all assets under management. And this is for us crucially important because this is not only with regards to their operations, but as well to the managed portfolios. Next slide, please. Well, and this is now to underline and showcase a little bit the stability of our banks. On the left-hand side, on that chart, you see the smaller bubbles. These are the three big banks, far right, with LLB, LGT, and VP Bank. The x-axis show the Tier 1 ratios, and on the y-axis, you see the leverage ratio. And this is a comparison of, let's say, the in Liechtenstein systemically important banks compared to the global SIFIs. The size of the bubbles demonstrate how big the banks are, and this means our banks are very small on a global scale, but they are outstandingly stable in an international comparison. And with that, I would like to hand over to David. David, it's your turn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Next slide, please. Thank you. Let's have a brief look at the Liechtenstein tax system. Liechtenstein has a moderate corporation taxation of 12.5%, and with the notional interest deduction of 4%, you can get even lower. Much more important, but in my opinion, is that the tax system is very, very simple, and many types of income are not taxed at all. Also, the VAT is very low. It's only 7.7%, as in Switzerland. Next slide, please. We're now moving on to the fund industry. For many years, the Liechtenstein fund industry has specialized in the area of white label funds. The entire ecosystem is focused on white label funds, and also well over 80% of our funds in Liechtenstein are white label funds. Liechtenstein is not the fund domicile for the big asset managers as JP Morgan, as BlackRock or Fidelity. It's the center for small and medium-sized asset managers who want to set up their funds, and maybe also for startups. Also, the asset structuring is a very important pillar of the Liechtenstein fund industry. Liechtenstein is also a cross-border hub for white label funds. The Liechtenstein funds are passported into 25 European countries, and it's already an important domicile for doing cross-border business for white label funds, and maybe within the next years it will become the most important one. Next slide, please. As we heard from Simon, Liechtenstein is part of the EA and therefore adopts all the EU regulation. And so Liechtenstein has also the fund structures that are in line with the EU regulation. Maybe we and our structures are a little less complicated than in other jurisdictions. So we have the UCITS, we have the alternative investment funds with the sub types of VOISEF, VOIVEK, and LTIF. And yes, and it's rather simple. We don't need many different types because everything is regulated in the fund documentation, the fund document. This the next slide. Also, if we have a look at the legal forms, we have the typical SICAF. Important is also the contractual fund in Liechtenstein, also the trusts. Also, thanks to these many different legal forms, the funds can be structured in Liechtenstein in a tailor-made manner according to the needs of the fund initiator and his investors. Next slide, please. Now, the advantages of Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein has a very active tax system for investment funds, very attractive because there are no taxes on funds. They are completely exempt from taxation. The investor has only to pay the income taxes of his home country. Liechtenstein takes no taxes at all. There's a cost planning reliability for the fund initiators because an all-in fee is common practice for the management companies and the custodians for the setup or for setting up a fund and for the running costs. So cost planning reliability also for the investors. Next slide, please. Liechtenstein has a very flexible AIF, alternative investment fund legislation. For example, there's no mandatory minimum diversification. The terms and conditions may be specified in the fund documents. And there are also allowed almost all types of investments. For example, the first crypto asset fund with the European regulation was set up in Liechtenstein. As we already heard, Liechtenstein is in a customs and monetary union with Switzerland. Therefore, if somebody wants to market his fund also in Switzerland, there's an advantage of the Liechtenstein fund. There are some advantages of the Liechtenstein fund domicile. One important one is that the Liechtenstein funds are the only foreign funds for which Swiss investors do not have to pay stamp duty when buying the fund. So if a Swiss or somebody who has his deposit in Switzerland buys a foreign fund, he has to pay maybe 3 times taxes. The withholding tax of the fund domicile, stamp duty when buying it, and then his own income tax. With the Liechtenstein fund, he has only to pay his income tax because the other 2 taxes don't exist. Liechtenstein has also very fast processes. This applies for the Financial Market Authority and for the Mancos, and therefore it has also a very short time to market. Next slide, please. I want to give you only one example of their authorization or notification of a fund. There is a maximum time limit for the Financial Market Authority by law. So the Financial Market Authority must not need more than 10 working days for the approval of a UCITS and not more than 20 working days from an alternative investment fund. But the average duration at the moment is around about 4 to 5 days. So Liechtenstein has a very fast system, very simple and flexible. And the specialization on white label funds and the favorable environment pay off. Next slide, please. Thank you. If we have a look at EFAMA, the statistics of EFAMA, the European Fund and Asset Management Association, Liechtenstein, in terms of growth in the number of funds, is on 3rd place after Ireland and Germany, far ahead of the United Kingdom and Luxembourg. It would take too much time to list all the many little advantages of the Liechtenstein Fund Center, but I hope I could give you a small impression of the rising Fund Center Liechtenstein. And thank you, and I hand over now to Thomas.
Thank you, David, for the fund part. I will now go in the last part of the presentation about Liechtenstein on the sector of the fiduciaries and about wealth structuring, also a very important and famous part of the Liechtenstein financial sector. On the first slide here, you can see the key aspects which differ Liechtenstein from other jurisdictions in this area. First point is clearly that we are a civil law jurisdiction, and in the same time we offer a codified trust law since almost 100 years, which is unique and very special, that you can have the civil law and the typical common law product trust also in a civil law jurisdiction like Liechtenstein. Generally spoken, Liechtenstein has a very liberal legal framework. So the structuring in Liechtenstein is very flexible. The laws about the structures like trust foundations, limited by shares, all these different company forms, the laws are very liberal and offer a lot of planning possibilities for people using this kind of structures. A very important point for clients who are looking for asset protection is that in Liechtenstein, foreign court orders are not enforced, since Liechtenstein is not part of the Lugano Convention. So foreign claimants who have a case against someone having a structure in Liechtenstein, they cannot enforce their case. They may be won already in a foreign country, but they have to go to court again in Liechtenstein and force their claim here again. So that's additional protection for owners of Liechtenstein structures. The variety of structuring tools, I mean, the legal forms are very big. There are so many different types. I don't think you find so many different kind of legal forms in many other jurisdictions. We have, for example, the private establishment. The trust can be settled in Liechtenstein under Liechtenstein law, but also under foreign law. So you can have a Liechtenstein trust going after English law, Hong Kong law, or other law, typical trust jurisdictions, and the Liechtenstein court will, together with experts from that jurisdiction, rule the law, the cases according to the choice of law you took in your trust. We have a modern LLC law with a very low minimum capital, and we have also this special form of a business trust, which was inspired almost 100 years ago by the Massachusetts Business Trust. It's called the Registered Trust in Liechtenstein. Generally, the privacy protection in Liechtenstein is very strong. We have a long tradition, similar to Switzerland. Our laws respect privacy as good as possible. Of course, we follow the European anti-money laundering guideline and FATF rules, but we still have a strong link to privacy, and also data protection is fully according to the European law and is very strongly established. Last point, very strong argument for clients coming to Liechtenstein for wealth structuring is a very short period of statutes of limitations. So it's only 2 years. I will show you then later how other jurisdictions have this time. So in 2 years, all these trials to contest the structure are gone. If the structure is done irrevocable and the endowment is done properly, after 2 years, contest will fail. This is mainly also an advantage example for pre-matrimonial structures, or if you have forced heirship problems. Also, asset protection wise, this very short time of statutes of limitation gives clients a very good and very timely adaptation of wealth planning possibilities. Next slide, please. I won't go into all details on this slide. I just wanted to show you a short overview comparison of Liechtenstein with other jurisdictions. Liechtenstein is on the last line here. You can see that we have this only 2 years statute of limitation. Example given, Cayman or Hong Kong have 6 years. BVI has even no time limit. So that's a big difference here. Also, the rule against perpetuity is in Liechtenstein, like in other jurisdictions, not existing. You know this from the common law as a rule in Liechtenstein that does not exist. Next slide, please. The legal structures I mentioned, we have a big variety. We have a lot of different types. This is an overview with the most important points. You can see that the minimum capital is very reasonable. In the LLC case, it's even quite low with 10,000 euros or Swiss francs. Foundation has only 30,000 euros or Swiss francs minimum capital. Trust and other legal forms don't even have any kind of minimum capital requirements. Accounting duty is only necessary in certain legal forms if it's a commercial form. For example, in a trust or in a foundation case, if it's non-commercial, if it's a purely private or family foundation or trust, there's no accounting duty. If it's a charitable foundation or charitable trust, there is an accounting duty. The audit requirements you can see in the last line. So we have in certain cases also no audit duty. So that's also specific. You have to look at each legal form specifically to find out what are the requirements. Next slide. The main products in the wealth structure sector in Liechtenstein are the trust and the foundation, and you can here see the general concept of such structures like trust and foundation. It's called the separation of assets. If you have a natural person or a legal person owning a bank account, it's clearly the person is the owner. Same with a company like a limited by shares or a LLC, you always have an owner. And if you hand over your assets as a settler or a founder to a trust or to a foundation, the ownership goes over to this legal entity. The natural person, the settler or the founder, if it's done correctly, is not longer regarded as owner, and this gives strong protection, asset protection, because now the ownership is in the structure, in the wealth structure, who can that can own companies, underlying companies, bank accounts, and so on. And of course, there are always beneficiaries who have to be specified, who can profit from that new structure. So that's the basic principle of trust and foundations. Next slide. You see here the two types, foundation and trust. In the foundation case, there's a founder who establishes a legal entity, a family foundation or a charitable foundation, which is almost 20% of the foundations in Liechtenstein are charitable foundations. In the trust case, you have a settler who sets up a trust. That's the common law concept, also established in Liechtenstein. The new structure can hold assets, all kinds of assets, from liquid bankable assets to real estate, securities, art collections, and so on. That's in both cases possible, and it's done for the benefits of beneficiaries. I go on the next slide, please, a little bit more on the beneficiaries. There are two different types of foundation and trusts. It's the discretionary or irrevocable foundation and trust, or the fixed interest revocable foundation and trust. Of course, this is the issue about control. As soon as a structure like a foundation or a trust is controlled, and a fixed interest benefit or a revocable situation would mean that the founder or the settler or the beneficiaries have control, that has of course big tax consequences. If you do a discretionary irrevocable foundation or trust, you have certain advantages also in asset protection. You have only a class of potential beneficiaries. In the other case, with a fixed interest foundation or trust, you have a clearly list of beneficiaries which are named and have the right on these distributions. In the first case, discretionary irrevocable foundations, the beneficiaries have no claim to the distribution, have no fixed amount normally, and there's no defined time frame where the board of foundation or the trustee has to distribute. So of course, the left variety, discretionary irrevocable foundation or trust, is the much more favorable variant, because this gives much more protection, which is normally the case that clients are looking for. So that was the overview about the fiduciary, the wealth structuring part, and I hand over back to Mike for the general part. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you. Fascinating set of insights from your different perspectives. And we'll move into the Q&A session, and please, audience, anything that strikes you or you want to comment on, please do keep your questions moving. But the first question I have actually comes from someone who isn't able to be on the webinar today, but is very interested and will be watching the recording, but asked me to ask you, this is Lois Appleby, who works for ActionAid, international development charity, and just she'd be really interested to learn more about sort of trends in philanthropic giving in Liechtenstein. That's the first question. And then secondly, are there forums and events in Liechtenstein where charities might be able to find out more and connect with philanthropists? So it's just really interested, I think, in how the philanthropic giving part of wealth management is working in Liechtenstein.
Thank you for that question. I didn't fully understand the first part because the sound quality was a bit disrupted, but I think I just answered generally. The philanthropic sector in Liechtenstein is very strong. We have, as I mentioned, about 20% of the wealth structures who are charitable structures. The difference to other jurisdictions is that in Liechtenstein, there's a very liberal system. Although we have a foundation supervision authority who has a state supervision over the charities, the law is very liberal, and a specific point which is very interesting is that in Liechtenstein there are no requirements to give distributions to local beneficiaries, local charities, so you are fully free to distribute international. We have Liechtenstein foundations, charitable foundations, who fully support, for example, development aid projects in Africa or in Asia or anywhere in the world. There's no need to distribute a part of the assets in Liechtenstein. So also here, Liechtenstein is very liberal. That's mainly the biggest difference to other jurisdictions regarding philanthropy. And maybe a side remark, Liechtenstein has taken part first time ever in this Lilly Philanthropy Index by Indiana University, where more than 90 jurisdictions are rated, how strong the philanthropic sector is and how good it is. And we are very proud that Liechtenstein, by the first turn we took part now, last year, we won the first place of over 90 jurisdictions as the most favorable jurisdictions for philanthropic activities. That's a very good outcome, of course, for the first time we took part.
And I think Lois will be interested in connecting with such a centre with such a strong reputation, I think, for philanthropy. So thank you for that. Felix Huber has asked about where Liechtenstein funds are listed. Are they listed particularly on the Swiss exchange? Or where does the listing take place where funds choose to list?
Normally, when they are listed in Switzerland. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. Do you know how many listed funds there are?
Simon, did you want to say? Sorry.
I just wanted to amend. We have two companies listed in Liechtenstein. That's Landesbank and BP Bank. So they are both, the banks are listed at the Swiss Stock Exchange as well. So just to complement.
Thank you. And we've got a question just about the bank's commitment to net zero. I guess it's a,
excuse me, the line is interrupted. Mike, we can't understand you. The line is interrupted.
Okay, I'll try again. Could you indicate whether you can hear me now?
It's better.
It's better. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So just, Simon, on the comments you were making about the commitment of the banks in Liechtenstein to net zero, it's quite striking, I think, that the whole banking community is committed in that way. How is the financial centre working together to ensure the development of sustainable finance?
I hope I understood your answer correctly, because it was again a little bit interrupted. For example, we as a banking association, we're part of the so-called Financial Centers for Sustainability. So we try to engage at an international level as well. And the same is true for the FMA, for example, which is part and member of the network for greening the financial system. That's the network of the banking supervisors at the national banks. So we try to engage at the international level to really have an exchange, a very close exchange with other financial services hubs worldwide, to, let's say, assess and compare against what others do, to learn from others. And for the first time in 2020, Liechtenstein participated in the PACTA assessment, which rates financial centers against the alignment with the 1.5 Paris Agreement goal. And we did it in 2020. Again, the results will be published very soon. What I have heard is that the results were much better than in 2020, which shows the development of the way going forward and being more sustainable.
Thank you very much. And yes, you did answer exactly the question that I asked.
Okay, perfect.
Another area of interest is fintech. Fintech has been the goal for every financial centre, I think, over the last few years. And what kind of support do you provide for startups and innovative technology firms within the ecosystem?
Shall I start? I don't know.
Simon, that's your expertise.
Okay, good. Well, the Liechtenstein government provides quite an extensive innovation framework with 4 pillars. One is the regulatory laboratory, which sits with the FMA. So as a fintech, for example, it's not a sandbox, but you can approach very early the regulatory laboratory, the FMA, to have a dialogue, whether you need to have a license or whether this is really not under supervision. All the fintechs, they have to comply with due diligence laws in Liechtenstein, which is very important. The blockchain law that gives the regulatory framework, which was for the fintechs and still is very important to have predictability, clear guidance, what you can do and what you not can do. And then we have, it's part of this innovation framework, the Office for Innovation and Digitalization, which is an office of the government. And they started in 2015 with the first discussion about blockchain technology. And let's say the blockchain law was one of the first results of this innovation framework. So in Liechtenstein, you don't receive much of funding support, but what you receive is a clear regulatory framework. It's open friendly. It's business friendly, and this is very important to, let's say, not to be misused as a financial center, but on the other hand, to really give technological neutral, clear framework for predictability.
Thank you very much. Very clear.
Maybe I can add something. There is also an important institution, I think, is the Department of Financial Innovation and Digitalization. Dr. Thomas Dünser, there is the managing director or the director there. He's very helpful for new companies which want to come to Liechtenstein. So gives good information, gives help. Good institution here in Liechtenstein.
And it's something that makes a big difference to firms who wanting to set up in a financial center. There's a really good source of advice and guidance to ease that process and help out. A question from the audience just on with your ties to Switzerland. Has there been any effect following the events at Credit Suisse? It's the Swiss banking market obviously took a bit of a hit there. Has there been any effect in Liechtenstein from that? I'm presuming probably there's no real effect, but tell me more.
Well, honestly, no.
Maybe I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, Simon.
Go ahead.
Start. Oh, please, Simon.
Simon, that's a banking question, Simon.
Okay, I take it or I start. Well, honestly, no, we haven't been affected very much. It was very important on a global scale that Switzerland took a very fast decision. But that was not only important for Liechtenstein. I think that was for the stability of the whole financial sector very important. But no, our banks were, as I said, they have all or pursue all very risk-averse business strategies, and we haven't been affected very much, honestly.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case because of the way that you run your banking system. I guess the next question is about alternative investment funds. And it's really about where you see your competition. I mean, there's a number of financial centers, particularly those who work in offshore and other places, who would claim that they are the best places to set up alternative investment funds. And I guess where's your particular selling point? I guess if people are looking for alternative investments, it's probably that one's for David.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think it's not the topic to compete, with offshore jurisdictions. Onshore here in Europe, Liechtenstein has a very, very favorable regime. There's one point, of course, the main important thing, or the most important thing is the very short time to market. Yeah? To set up a fund from the first meeting to I can sell the fund, I can go and distribute the fund, is 6 to 10 weeks. It's very, very fast, and you can always have a meeting with the Financial Market Authority. It's in Liechtenstein we always talk about the short way. So if you have a problem, you can talk to the Financial Market Authority. Last year somebody he told me he called on Monday on the Financial Market Authority. He said, "Oh, I'm on Wednesday in Liechtenstein. Do you have time?" Maybe he was scared about the answer, but they said, "Yes, when do you want to come?" So it's very, you can talk to the people, you can clear up the problems, you can talk in advance before occurring a problem, how to solve, how to manage it, and this is useful when setting up the fund and while running the fund. And many people say we have compared jurisdictions. We had funds in other jurisdictions, I don't mention any name, and in Liechtenstein. And now we have re-domiciled all our funds to Liechtenstein because it's very easy, very you can talk to the people. It's easy system, very flexible, and yes, that's I think the main point. There maybe the costs are a little bit less compared to other jurisdictions in Europe, not to offshore funds, offshore jurisdictions normally. And as I said, we don't have taxes. There is no withholding tax in Liechtenstein, nothing. So it's very favorable. I don't know if you maybe I think one small advantage I will also tell. We have in Liechtenstein founder and investor shares. The investment company can issue founder and investor shares with and without voting rights. So this can be very favorable when taking decisions. If you have to ask all the investors, can be very time-consuming process. So you can here clear up these things within the founder shares with voting rights. That's also an advantage. And as I mentioned, also if you want to sell your fund in Switzerland, there's no better place to go because we have the best of two worlds. We have Switzerland and the tax advantage there, and we have the passport to Europe. It's a unique situation. No other country has this. And I want to add something about where to find the funds. We have on our website, lasv.ly, we have listed all the funds that are here in Liechtenstein. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think particularly that sort of speed of setup and the flexibility points are really, really important. We are, I'm afraid, out of time. We've got a couple of minutes left just to tidy up. So my job really is to issue, first of all, some thanks to you, the audience. It's been great to have you here. My thanks, of course, to our panelists today for a fascinating set of inputs. And my thanks, of course, to our sponsors once again, who allow us to run these series of webinars. Looking forward over the next few days, we have an event looking at EU financial services legislation on tomorrow. On Monday, Beating the Odds, My Life in Law, Literature and the Rest, which is about one person's story about how they overcame difficulties to get to where they are. And on Tuesday, a question: what should we teach our children about money? So keep an eye on the website for upcoming events. We'd look forward to seeing you again. And once again, huge thanks to our panelists today. It's been a fascinating insight, and we are really, really grateful for you taking the time today to share what's going on with Liechtenstein. Thank you very much.